couple months ago, my girlfriend Erin's parents planned a weekend trip out of town. Some kind of anniversary thing, I think. Normally, her folks are strict about me staying over, but with them gone for a few nights, she invited me to spend the weekend. She lives in one of those suburban neighborhoods where every house looks the same, and by 10 o'clock, the whole place feels deserted. That emptiness always creeps me out, so I was glad I wouldn't have to walk home late for once. I showed up around 8 with snacks, and we watched a movie until around midnight. Her room is upstairs facing the backyard, which borders a dense line of trees. There aren't many exterior lights, so once night falls, the view looks like a pitch-black wall. Her bed's a queen, so there was plenty of room. I don't even remember falling asleep, but I'll never forget the dream that followed. I've only had false awakenings a couple times before. If you don't know, it's when you dream that you've woken up, but you're still asleep. That night, I had 2 in a row. In the dream, I woke up to the sound of a door slamming downstairs. Heavy footsteps started pounding up the stairs. I sat up, ready to meet whoever it was, but froze when I noticed something strange. The room looked exactly the same as when we'd gone to bed, except for one detail. A thin strip of yellow light was spilling out from under the bedroom door. For some reason, I couldn't look away. My vision tunneled in on that glowing line while the sound of rushing footsteps grew louder. They stopped outside the door. Then silence. That's when the voices started. At first it was one woman's voice, hurling insults about me. Then it got personal, saying things no stranger could know. Secrets. Memories I'd never told anyone, not even Erin. One voice became many. It felt like 100 of them, dragging my worst thoughts out of my head and throwing them back at me. I couldn't take it. I ran for the door and yanked it open, and instantly, every light in the house went out. The voices cut off, and the air turned ice cold, sharp against my skin. For a moment, it felt like I'd stepped into a different world. I stumbled back to the bed and pulled the covers over me. Then I woke up, or thought I did. I sat up, relieved, but froze again when I looked at the door. That same strip of yellow light was glowing from underneath. Then the front door slammed, and the footsteps started all over again. The whole sequence replayed exactly. I ran to the door again. The lights cut out. The freezing air wrapped around me, and then I finally woke for real. Erin was asleep next to me this time, which is how I knew it was real. But when I looked toward the door, my heart almost stopped. That same strip of light was shining beneath it. Every light in the house was supposed to be off. I held my breath, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps, clear as day, moving downstairs. Someone was in the house. I grabbed my phone, quietly called 911, and then tiptoed to check the lock on the door. After that, I woke Erin, covering her mouth so she wouldn't scream. She stayed calm, which was a relief. Minutes later, the front door crashed open as the police entered. We heard shouting, boots on the stairs, chaos below us. When I finally went down, 2 masked men were being handcuffed and shoved into the back of a squad car. The cops told us the men had broken in through a downstairs window. Later, Erin's parents learned the suspects admitted they'd seen a social media post about the trip and assumed the house was empty. That part I can accept, the break-in, the noises that probably leaked into my dream. But what I can't get past is the dream itself. The voices knew things about me no one else should. And that strip of light, I shouldn't have been able to picture it so vividly while lying down with my eyes shut. Yet when I woke for real, it was there exactly as I'd seen it. Even now, weeks later, I still see it sometimes. Not literally, but like an afterimage burned into my mind. Always there, in the corner of my vision. The burglars are gone. The break-in is over. But that strip of light and those voices still haven't left me. I'll keep this short. Most nights I fall asleep to noise. It's how I crash fast. Sometimes it's a podcast about space. Sometimes it's a compilation of old movie scores. Sometimes it's just a recording of rain. I'm an active dreamer, so whatever I nod off to almost always slips into my dreams. If I watch a soccer highlight reel, I wake up with cleats in my head. It's the trick that stopped my childhood nightmares. This happened during a weekend sleepover at my friend Caleb's house. His parents were out of town, which is why we were there, me, Caleb, and Marcus. Caleb's living room has 3 giant couches that basically become one massive sleeping island. We crashed there and fell into that half-sober, half-asleep place you get at those ages. That night, I had one of the vividest dreams I've had in years. I was on a small fishing boat, out on a violent gray-green sea. The sky looked bruised, like someone had smeared charcoal across a purple dusk. The boat jerked, and I felt it. Something struck us below the hull. Water gushed in. The floor tilted. I tried to plug the leak with my jacket, and it was hopeless. Panic set, in the way it does in dreams. Slow, syrupy, unreal. Then, from nowhere, a seagull landed on the railing, cocked its head, and in a crisp, human voice said, "Get up." I sprang awake. I usually wake groggy, but this time I snapped alert. For a moment, everything felt off, like I was looking at the room through someone else's eyes. The living room looked exactly the same as when we went to bed. Marcus was curled on his side, and Caleb was flat on his back. But there was an underlying sound, a steady rushing somewhere above us. It didn't sound like dripping. It sounded like a hose left running, like water pouring full force. I told myself the sound explained the sea dream. I also told myself I was being paranoid. Then I did the stupid thing. I got up to check it out. I crept up the hallway. With every step, the noise grew louder. It was definitely coming from the upstairs bathroom at the end of the hall. The door was cracked, and a pale line of light split the darkness. From the threshold, I could see a sink with one knob turned hard to the right, and water gushing into the basin like a miniature waterfall. Something in my chest went cold. The bathroom was big, with a tub tucked around a corner and a counter that created blind spots. Someone could easily be crouched behind the curtain or waiting near the toilet. My legs went jelly. I backed away, bolted down the stairs, and shook Caleb awake. "At least check it," I hissed. "Someone's upstairs." Caleb sat up with that groggy sluggishness that snaps into focus when adrenaline hits. We left Marcus asleep and moved together. When we reached the bathroom, Caleb didn't pause. He shoved the door open and stepped in. Everything happened in a heartbeat. A shape lunged from behind the tub and hurled itself at Caleb. Then came the dull crack of something striking flesh. The attacker swung a wooden baseball bat, raising it again, like he was ready to cave Caleb's ribs in. I flung myself at the guy without thinking, more because there was no plan than because I was brave. It turned into a wrestling match, 3 bodies on slippery tile. The intruder was bigger than both of us, aggressive and strong, in a way that didn't make sense for a random thief. Minutes later, or maybe seconds, time fuzzed into one fight. He broke free, shoved us both aside, and ran down the stairs. By the time we reached the front door, he was gone into the cold night. We called the police. They arrived, took statements, and found a downstairs window pushed open. No prints beyond the obvious. No cameras on the property to show his face. The police said it was probably a burglar who'd scared easy targets away, but their theory didn't sit with us. Why would someone deliberately turn a faucet on full blast? That wasn't random. That was bait. Whoever it was wanted someone upstairs alone, and he planned for the person to find them. Caleb lives in a quiet neighborhood. The idea that some opportunistic thief would go through the trouble of setting a trap felt wrong. It felt targeted. We stayed at Caleb's that night anyway. All three of us in the living room, alert and muttering whispers. Caleb had a nasty bruise across his ribs from the bat. Marcus wouldn't sleep. He sat by the door like it would open any second. In the morning, when the adrenaline finally ebbed into exhaustion, we pieced through what little we had: a broken latch, scuff marks on the bathroom tiles, the sense that the whole thing had been considered and deliberate. If whoever came in wanted to steal, why swing that bat? If whoever came in had intended to rob a house, they wouldn't give their target a chance to walk into a trap. The other possibility, the one I don't like to think about, is that it wasn't theft or robbery at all. It felt like someone had planned to find a single person alone and catch them off guard. The faucet, the dark bathroom, the corner the intruder hid behind. What haunts me is how ordinary the setup was. A slightly open window, a quiet street, a sink handle turned hard to the right. If I had walked upstairs by myself, if Caleb had been asleep and awake had been too late. I don't want to imagine it. Now every time I hear running water at night, I wake up and look over my shoulder. I still fall asleep to recordings, thunderstorms, space podcasts. But I don't trust my dreams the way I used to, and I never, ever walk up a dark staircase alone. What I'm about to tell you is the most unsettling experience of my life, and to this day, I can't explain it. I used to work nights at a small roadside tavern, about 30 minutes outside of my hometown. Not exactly the kind of job you dream about, but in areas like mine, jobs are scarce, and you take what you can get. The place was nothing impressive, just a low-key bar with a few locals every night, but it was steady enough to pay the bills. Most nights went by the same way: drinks poured, bar cleaned, lights off, keys in the ignition, and then the long ride home. That night felt no different at first. I closed just after 1:30 a.m. and headed for home. My route was mostly twisting country backroads, cutting through farmland and patches of forest. Hardly anyone uses those roads after midnight. No cars, no houses in sight, for miles at a time, and no streetlights except the occasional dim yard light way off in the distance. Just darkness and asphalt, winding endlessly through foggy hills. Normally, I didn't mind the quiet. I sometimes even enjoyed it. The drive home gave me a weird calm, a chance to think, or just let my mind wander after hours of small talk behind the bar. But this night was different. It was the fog. As soon as I turned onto the first stretch of road, I realized how unusually thick it was. I'd seen fog on these back roads before, but this was heavier, almost suffocating. The beams of my headlights were swallowed completely after just a few feet. Even with the brights on, it was like aiming two flashlights into a wall of cotton. My visibility dropped to nothing, and I could hardly see the yellow lines beneath me. I had to ease off the gas just to feel remotely safe. It frustrated me, because all I wanted was to get home, crawl into bed, and pass out. Instead, I crept along through an endless curtain of fog. That's when I noticed it. Through the layers of gray, off to the right side of the road, something faint blinked. At first, it reminded me of a distant hazard light, or maybe a reflector marker, glowing in the beams of my headlights. I figured it was roadside equipment, or maybe part of an old sign. But the more I drove, the more I noticed it wasn't staying in one place. It didn't move closer, didn't move farther away. It just followed me, blinking steadily through the fog, always at the same distance, as though pacing my car. A pulse, pause, pulse, over and over again. My stomach sank. I tried to rationalize it, but there was no logical explanation I could buy into. My depth perception in fog is bad enough, but this was stranger than that. It almost felt alive. A knot of dread began to form in my chest, and after another minute of it, keeping pace, I slowed down. I thought maybe if I dropped my speed to a crawl, the light would reveal itself for what it really was, some high-post light set back in a field, or a mailbox reflector, something ordinary, anything ordinary. But as I slowed, so did it. The blinking didn't falter, didn't drift. It stayed right there, glowing faintly like an eye peering at me, waiting. I came to a complete stop in the middle of the road, and the light stopped too, blinking in perfect rhythm, with the fog swirling around it, as though mocking me. That was when it began to change. The steady blink shifted in intensity, not faster, not slower, but stronger with each pulse. Instead of fading, every flicker burned brighter than the last, like a flame being fanned by invisible wind. It went from faint and hazy to sharp and blinding, turning the fog around it into a glowing white cloud. That was enough for me. I wasn't about to find out what the hell was watching me from the side of the road. I reached down to throw the car in reverse, but that's when I realized something was horribly wrong. The engine was silent. I hadn't turned the key. I knew I hadn't. But the car had died on its own. My veins turned to ice. My hands shook violently on the wheel, which they never do. I've poured drinks for hours at a time, steady hands, no matter what. But at that moment, I couldn't control the trembling. And no matter how many times I twisted the key, the engine refused to turn. Meanwhile, that light kept growing brighter, and somehow closer. It began to feel less like electricity and more like something feeding off me, feeding off the car itself. I reached for my phone, thinking at least I could record it, maybe even call someone. But when I pressed the screen, it was dead, completely flat. No screen, no faint glow, nothing. I checked the battery back at the bar, 20% at least. And now, nothing. Panic consumed me. Before I could even collect myself, the light surged with an intensity beyond anything I'd ever seen. It flared like the explosion of 100 flashbangs going off at once. Blinding, suffocating brightness poured through every angle of the driver's seat. I threw my arms over my face, squeezed my eyes shut, but even through my eyelids I felt seared by it, like staring into the sun at point blank. 10 seconds passed, maybe more. Then, silence and darkness. The fog was still where it had been, heavy and suffocating, but the light was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. I sat there gasping for air, drenched in cold sweat, waiting for it to come back. My ears rang from the silence, and my chest pounded with adrenaline. Finally, almost as an act of desperation, I turned the key one more time, and the engine roared back to life immediately, as if nothing had happened. No hesitation, no sputter, just normal. Like everything I experienced was some cruel trick. I didn't waste a second. I floored it the rest of the ride home, barely letting myself blink, terrified that any lapse in focus would bring back that cursed light. But it never did. Since then, I've told the story dozens of times, to friends, family, even strangers, and I've heard every theory. Swamp gas, plane lights reflecting in low clouds, car trouble coincidentally at the worst time. But none of it sits right with me, because I felt something during those minutes out on the road. That wasn't mechanical failure, that wasn't weather. Something out there was watching me, and for one reason or another, it wanted me to stop.